Hey, welcome to episode 246 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. We're closing in on 250. I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and I told my guests just before the show that, hey, I'm kind of nervous, which is ironic because we are talking about meditation and mindfulness as part of what we discussed today. This is also ironic to me because some years ago, actually for much of my life, from junior high on into my 30s, I felt like the most stressed out person in the world. I just couldn't relax, had a hard time focusing, and when I tried to do things like meditate and be mindful, I would do it for a short time, but then I would talk myself out of doing it, and I did this over and over. And over again. Meditation and mindfulness are such simple concepts, but really tough to implement. Can be very challenging to implement. So there's so much more I want to say on this, but I have a guest, a guest. I have a guest. I have some guesses about life too, but I have a guest, so I'll tell you a bit more about him in a sec. But first, this.
Today's guest, Kirk Hinkleman.
Welcome back to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Let me tell you about my friend Kirk. Kirk Hinkleman returns to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast to help us navigate the conundrum between wanting to be more relaxed and productive and creative in our daily lives, and at the same time often being so stressed out and not knowing what to do about it. Just a small task, Kirk, nothing major. Don't worry. Kirk is the Director of Creative Design and Wellbeing at both LifeWorks and Alliance of Change. He is a speaker, author, and a Certified Mindfulness Meditation Teacher committed to helping people find purpose through awareness-based action. He proudly calls himself a positive agitator and is an irreverent, brilliant, and a student who learns as he teaches. Please join me in welcoming Kirk Hinkleman to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Yay!
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Kirk. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. I'm stoked to be the 246th part of the 246th episode, and the second time being on the podcast. So it's really lovely to be invited, and I thank you for that. And thanks for the warm welcome and the kind words.
So should we go right into it?
Sure.
So you meditate and practice mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
So that must mean you were born with like a meditation gene, a mindfulness gene.
Uh, I don't know if I've got that gene in me, but I was born into a family that had a spiritual thread to it. Certainly not the path I'm on now, but there was definitely a connection to a third dimension and, you know, uh, practices of, going inward.
When did you first hear about mindfulness and meditation?
I probably heard about it before this, but the time that it landed was when I was at a gathering in Toronto, in Canada, back in 2009. And the gathering offered mindfulness sessions each morning before the day's programming began. And so I found myself sitting and practicing this new thing to me, meditation. And there was a mindfulness teacher as part of the event. And then also beyond that practice, there was a little bit of mindfulness sprinkled into some of the pedagogical frameworks we were using and playing with while at this event that kind of intertwined with the work that we did.
How long ago was that?
It was 2009, so I think 16 years ago.
Be looking back on your life before 2009. I assume you were born some years before that time, right?
Yeah, 1977. I'm a child of the 70s, true Gen Xer.
I was born in 1975. You're a young pup, yeah.
Oh yeah, yes. You are my elder, and I respect thee for that. So
Thank you. It's yeah. So anyway, looking back on your life before 2009, would you say you were a relaxed person?
I actually think that I did sort of identify as somebody who was kind of laid back and relaxed. And if we were to move forward in 2009, my second child of three had just been born. So we had two kids under the age of 2 years old at that point, and really were kind of present to that moment. And yeah, I think that things were going pretty good. And then, move forward, I think eventually I for sure would identify 4 or 5 years down the road as someone who is not relaxed, who's quite stressed, quite anxious, and life was becoming almost like a pressure cooker for me.
Did you say two kids under 3 years old?
Under 2 years old, actually. We knew we wanted to have more than one child. We did not expect to have number two so soon after having number one. In fact, my wife cried when she found out she was pregnant. We don't tell him that, though.
Yeah, and let's hope he doesn't watch this podcast.
Right. Well, he, like all most standard teenagers this day, this podcast is going to be beyond the 45-second attention span that he might have. So
Yeah,
maybe as an adult, he'll hear that.
Yeah, we're 8 minutes into it, so we're safe.
Yeah, he's logged off by now for sure.
So for most of your life, you felt naturally more relaxed and at ease with how things were going.
Yeah, for most of my life, I think so. Yeah, I think I sort of floated through life. What I understand now about true presence and awareness is that I probably wasn't super relaxed, and certainly was unaware of a lot of stuff that was present. And I think that it's quite easy for humans to get kind of just sucked into this vortex of mindless action and habitual routine, and yeah, have some sort of idea or notion of how your life is going. And through mindfulness and subsequent clarity, I can look back and think, oh, I probably wasn't showing up with much of an aware presence.
So, but if I had asked you back in high school or college, you would have said, "Oh, I'm relaxed. I'm going with the flow." How do you? So you had that impression of yourself. What has changed in recent years that has altered your impression of who you were back then?
Well, I mean, having a consistent and steady, disciplined mindfulness practice has brought quite a bit of insight to my life, and I think that if you go from 2009 to 2020, which is like 11 years of off and on meditation practice, mostly guided through apps and things like that. Um, Look, I think any sort of practice is good for you. But during that time, as the pressure cooker that I alluded to began to feel more heavy of life, and ended up having a third kid and my career, and we live in coastal Southern California, and it's an expensive place to live. So that all the normal pressures of being an adult and being a husband and a partner and a father and trying to provide for the family, I think all started to weigh down. And I think because of a lack of presence and maybe being stuck in this trance of, if I can quote like one of my teachers in mindfulness, Tara Brach, she talks about this trance of unworthiness that you can get trapped in. I began to drink more alcohol. Alcohol, I think, became a crutch for me. And yeah, so I was this dual, like, listening to guided meditations every morning about change and finding your authentic self and being more present, all while not feeling my best because I had been drinking the night before. And so 2020 on, I stopped drinking. And it's amazing how many insights will come to you when you're sober for extended periods of time. And so marrying the two, then the practice and the sobriety, really kind of catapulted my understanding of who I am as a person, who I am authentically at my core, and would have the skills and resources to drop the narrative in my head and kind of shift my relationship with my thought pattern, shift my relationship with these habits, unhealthy habits. So, yeah.
Well, would you please say more about the trance of unworthiness and why it's so seductive?
Yeah, I think, especially because we're inundated with information all the time, right? Our phones are constantly buzzing us. And so we're being assaulted, is the word I use when I teach. We're constantly being assaulted with information and with news. So there's this fear-based messaging that happens on many platforms. There's also marketing that speaks to people and I think can sadistically make people feel like they're less than, and that if you did this or bought this, that would be better. When we're not practicing to quiet our mind and steady our heart, we kind of unconsciously board what Joseph Goldstein, another teacher of mine that I follow. And when I say teacher of mine, sometimes I'm talking about somebody who I actually know personally. Most of the time I'm talking about mindfulness teachers and professionals out in the wild who publish books and have podcasts and who I listen to, who I consider teachers, even though I've never met this person. So Joseph Goldstein would be one of those people. Tara Brach would be one of those people. He talks about getting on the train of thought. Excuse me, Jay. Transparent podcasting. I'm at my house and my dog's trying to break into the room. I, I, Joseph Goldstein talks about getting on the train of thought, and the issue with that is that you don't know where the train is going, right? And then couple that metaphor with Jack Cornfield, another one of my teachers who I've never met, who talks about thoughts being little dictators. And the actual physiological process of a thought is like nothing. It's so finite and minute. It's like it's a fleeting moment. Yet these little fleeting moments are like dictators telling you where to go, what to believe, what to do, reinforce habits. For me, for the longest time, being unhealthy habits. And so when those unhealthy habits become my pattern of behavior, then it's certainly super easy for me in the mornings in mindfulness practice to then create these narratives about how I am, you know, I am a degenerate. I am a flawed person. I am all these things, right? And what Tara teaches is that that's the trance of unworthiness that she's speaking of, that we just get into this thought pattern, this feedback loop of, yeah, we're reinforcing that, right? So I think that in the mornings and I go about my day in a way where I think I'm going to attack it and I'm going to start to change my patterns of behavior. And then later that day, one of those little finite moments of thoughts comes in and says, why don't you go grab a drink? And I just mindlessly go do that and then see that loop just kind of continues to happen. And so Tara teaches, and through mindfulness practice, what we're training ourselves to do is just to become aware of the trance happening or the thought pattern happening or that we're on the train. And if we can just get to a place where we realize we're on the train, we can reach up and pull the brake so that the train stops and we can get off, right? Or the weight that I was talking about, another metaphor that I use is that sometimes it feels like this trance of unworthiness is like I'm sitting directly underneath a waterfall. And that's heavy.
Underneath a waterfall?
A waterfall.
Oh, waterfall.
Oh, yeah, like a waterfall. So like if you can think about what that might feel like a waterfall coming from like 100 feet, like it's intense and it's loud and there's a lot of noise and there's pressure and it's cold. And so when I realize I'm there, now that I'm resourced through my practice, I can back up and actually sit just a few feet behind the water, and then I'm looking at the water. When I exit the train and I get off and I go up to the side of a hill and I watch the train continue, I'm watching the train of thought go. So it's recognizing that A, you're on the train or that you're sucked into the vortex in this trance of unworthiness. And then B, understanding that you can't stop those thoughts from happening, but we can shift our relationship with them so that thoughts are not right. Thoughts are real, they're happening, but oftentimes they're not true. Right? And oftentimes they're old news, and a lot of the times they're fake news.
So you've said our brains are a superpower to stop it from thinking is like trying to stop our hearts from beating. Nope. But when I have a thought I don't want, it's tempting to go to war with it, to try to fight it. So how do you? Are you just better at eliminating unwanted thoughts from your brain than the average cook?
Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting question. And I think it brings up, I think, what a lot of people misinterpret mindfulness and meditation to be. Because I think you framed the question, am I just better at getting rid of thoughts than the average Kirk? And that's not what mindfulness is about.
That's not what it's about.
No, our thoughts are going to happen whether we're trying to turn them off or not. And oftentimes when I meet people who, and when I'm teaching, I've got people in my office, right? I do this at work, who say I can't meditate because I can't stop my thoughts. And it's an opportunity for me to say, well, that's not what meditation's about. We can't stop these superpowers, the superpower of our brain from thinking. That's what it's designed to do. We can become aware of the brain doing its job and choose to lean into which thoughts are happening that are useful, are wise, right? That speak to who we are as human beings at our authentic core. So it took me a while to deal with that. And look, I'm a human being and I'm a certified mindfulness meditation teacher, and I still have anxiety. I still get sucked into the trance of unworthiness. I still board the train of thought. That's normal. But I think what happens is, for me, pardon me, and this was one of the, I've been on a couple of long retreats where I go and sit in silence for like 7 or 8 days. And one of the teachers at my most recent retreat talked about, if you can think of a timeline, and every time you're sitting in meditation that you recognize a thought, you drop a pin. And then you recognize a thought and you drop a pin. And what can happen to us is that we beat ourselves up about, oh, I'm not doing this well. I just realized that I'm on the train of thought. And actually, every time you catch yourself on the train and thinking and say, oh, that's thinking, you label it with something, right? One of the skills we do is we label it thinking or planning or, story. Like, this is a story that I'm playing in my head. Coming back to some sort of touch point, like my breath or where I'm sitting or the ground that I'm standing on or whatever. That's mindfulness. And what she said was, our hope over time is that the pins begin to be dropped closer together, right? So you could have somebody who sits for 30 minutes and they come out of it and they go, oh, that was the most beautiful meditation sit I've had in a long time. I mean, I just felt so good. And I was in this another place, right? And you can have someone sitting right next to them who did the same 30-minute sit say, man, that was incredibly hard. I just could not get my mind to stop thinking. And I had to keep coming back to my breath, and it kept getting interrupted with a thought. And then I had to come back to my breath. It's like, when we zoom out of those two people's experiences, for me, subject B, who was struggling and beating themselves up about how that session went, actually was likely engaged in a more mindful sit than the person who said, oh, they were off in some wonderful land and it was a wonderful experience for them. And that's fine. That's useful for people. I'm not sure that that's really mindfulness at its core. Mindfulness is becoming aware of our thoughts and them happening and practicing how to come back to the present moment, right? So that when we're out in the wild and something happens, we're able to respond with a little more wisdom, because we can take a pause and go, okay, this is something that's happening, and I can be different with it.
So you mentioned your relationship with alcohol changed in 2020. Would you describe more about how mindfulness and meditation helped you make that change?
Well, I would be not telling the whole truth if I just claimed that I woke up on my own to the alcohol. My wife of 22 years, we just celebrated 22 years of marriage last weekend.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Jason. Who is my everything, and any pithy Hallmark quote you want to say that matches her for me. And, I had been struggling with it, but really kind of unable to flip the switch. And so it took a nudge from her. It took a nudge from her in a real moment of bottoming out and looking across at each other. And I said, don't give up on me. And she's like, I'm not going to give up on you, but what are you going to do about it? And that was like a thunderclap
I'm
moment.
not going to give up on you, but what are you going to do about it? Wow.
Yeah. Like, all right, dude, what are you going to do about it? And for me, that was a thunderclap moment. And all I needed. So that was the last day. That was the morning of the first day of my sobriety. And I haven't looked back since. And it's been the best decision I've made in my life. So to your point about how does mindfulness help, it helped prepare me for that thunderclap moment, because I had been working through the trance of unworthiness, but then in these practice sessions through guided meditations, because I was really new with the practice still, listening to people say all the right things into my ears over several years of internally battling that I knew that I had to deal with some problem that to date hadn't been able to effectively deal with. And then a real conversation with my wife, and oftentimes real conversations with my wife end up being very fruitful for me.
So that the moment you set the intention, or I'm sorry, that morning you set the intention like you have many times before that you were going to stop drinking. After that moment, I'm sure you had the thought sometimes, I want to drink right now. I want to drink now. What did you do when that thought came up?
Yeah, I honestly think that my sobriety journey does not match the typical one. And this is something I talked to my therapist. I got connected with a therapist right away around addiction and substance abuse. Um, I I don't know, Jason, that I had clear I need a drink and how to deal with that, because my wife looked across the table at me and said, "I'm not bailing on you, but what are you going to do about it?" It was clear to me that this was my chance to right the ship. And the alternative was to lose everything, not just my wife, my kids, my life, possibly my career. So I had all the motivation I needed. And like I said, I think that I had been working up to the point of just nervous about quitting, maybe physiologically. I don't know, but I stopped. I did get involved with some groups. This was all during COVID too. So this all therapy and these groups that I would go to are all via Zoom. Uh, I sort of blame and thank the pandemic for my drinking. I blame it because I don't know about you, but in my circles, when the world shut down, it gave everyone permission to just drink whenever you wanted to. That was like a thing. Like everyone's on a Zoom. It's like, what's in that cup, right? So for me, I think it was like there was a smoldering fire and someone threw gasoline on it. That's what the pandemic and the drinking did for me. And the thanks for lighting the fire, because it got so hot that it affected others around me. And so my inability to do it for myself, uh, the pandemic threw a match on it and made it such that others around me felt the heat and responded in a way that really changed my life.
It, it's inspiring what we can do for each other. Your family, your wife, your family help became the catalyst that helped you change your life.
Yeah. They're the motivation always. Yeah. And it's been really neat to have more and more open conversations. And frankly, this is the most open I've ever been on a podcast about this. It might be the only time I've ever talked about this on a podcast, but but being able to have sprinkled in moments with my children about, how I showed up in their life prior to and after alcohol was a part of my life. And it's really important to have these conversations. And it's a serious thing. It's a serious, I was talking about marketing earlier. I mean, alcohol it's widely accepted here. And my kids are of age now. One graduated high school, one in the throes of high school, and one in middle school. Like they're at the age now where they're being exposed to these things. And So having conversations about appropriate places to do that and how to be safe with it, and maybe decisions on not to do it at all or whatever, like they're going to have to navigate that themselves. But I stand as an example of what it can look like when you're out of control with it, and what it looks like to take your life back. And yeah, it's been an amazing last 5 years for me.
What would you say? What words of encouragement would you give someone who's currently in the throes of some addiction that they feel they want to get out of, but they keep coming back to it, be that addiction, alcohol, or something else?
Yeah. Well, first, I'd like to say that I'm not a trained or professional in the world of addiction and substance abuse. So this would just be like my take on it as somebody who used alcohol as a coping mechanism. I mean, I think it started as a social thing, like most of us, but then I think sprinkle in a little bit of pandemic, a little bit of just my life in general, and a little bit of genetic history with alcoholism, and it manifests as it did for me. I actually read, so here's something that really helped. I read a book, and maybe I don't think it's back here. I read a book that a friend of mine from high school, actually, who reconnected through Facebook. We had a conversation, and he had quit drinking like a year and a half before I did, and was just speaking in glowing terms about how positively it has affected his life. And he read a book called This Naked Mind. I forget the author's name. But
It's called what?
This Naked Mind.
This Naked Mind.
Yeah, and it's a woman who just kind of shared her own story of her alcohol use, being she was in sales, I believe, and drinking, and while you're out on the road, doing your job is a normal practice for people. Like you go to a networking event and leads into the evening, and so she just framed drinking in a way. She juxtaposed the consumer's point of view from alcohol in this country with the way that alcohol is marketed in this country, and sort of lets us consumers off the hook a little bit. But the key there is that we become aware of what's happening, and then it's a choice inside. So I would just encourage people who are struggling with addiction to call for help, to be vulnerable and ask for help. My help came after one of my least proud moments of my life, and thankfully everyone is okay. And the help came in the form of my wife asking a simple and profound and direct question. So if I could go back, I would tell myself to reach out for help sooner, because all it took for me was other people who could understand my struggle, and some basic resources like therapy. I would absolutely recommend going to a therapist, because I don't think alcohol or substance abuse is necessarily just a physiological thing. I think it becomes a physiological dependency. And it's, for me, was speaking to an underlying issue and stuff that I was unsettled with in my life. And it became something that I used to cope with that. So there's something else going on. There was something else going on for me that needed to be addressed. So I would just say, back to your original question, just to seek help. There are lots of resources that you can reach out to, people you can reach out to, and it's gonna maybe take some pride swallowing, and definitely a big helping of vulnerability.
Some pride swallowing and big helping of vulnerability. Is the author of This Naked Mind, does Annie Grace sound?
That's right.
Like?
Annie sounds familiar to me. Yeah. I think I've given my copy out to several different people. Dear friend of mine, probably about 18 months after I quit after having read that book and after struggling for a long time, and then having conversations with me. So yeah, it's tremendously helpful. And it's not an AA thing, not throwing shade on AA. I never went to AA. My medical group is Kaiser, and they have their own addiction groups and stuff. And she talks about AA and those traditional ways to quit. But her for me, that book was just much more real and now, and that she told her own story of a successful businesswoman and X, Y, and Z. And then she framed alcohol. She used the word poison. She's like, if you just changed the word alcohol or beer or wine to poison, would you drink 3 glasses of poison every night?
When you put
That
it
was
that
effective to
way.
me.
Wow. So, have you given up like all things, like since you gave up alcohol, since you have sobriety in alcohol, does that mean you have sobriety with sugar too?
No, no, I get along well with sugar. Uh, it's so sweet.
It's a
It's
sweet
so sweet.
relationship.
It's a sweet relationship for sure. No, I still indulge in I mean, I don't think I have a sugar problem. I mean, maybe I have an intermittent sugar problem. I don't know. But yeah, no, I still have vices, and you know, yeah, but sugar and I currently we tight.
I wanted to ask that because Elisa used to put people who were mindful and meditators up on a pedestal, like, oh, they did this good thing, so they must have all the shit together.
Mm,
Is that
mm.
true?
I think that my shit is more together than it's been ever, and yet it's not all together. And I'll tell a story that I heard. So Dr. Sanjay Gupta, I think I'm saying his name right, who's I think, relatively known, someone in the media, right? Said he
Yeah.
went to meditate with the Dalai Lama. These are the privileges you get when you're a famous doctor. So he says that he recounts his experience. They bring him into the temple where the Dalai Lama is sitting, and they put him right next to the Dalai Lama.
Oh my
And
God.
The Dalai Lama doesn't open his eyes. He's just in his meditative practice. And so Dr. Gupta says, I sat there and I was sitting there and it was like 45 minutes, an hour into the practice. And I opened my eyes, I look over, and the Dalai Lama also had his eyes open and he was looking at me. And he smiled. And Dr. Gupta recounts that he said to the Dalai Lama, "This is really hard." And the Dalai Lama looked at him and said, "Me too."
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, I bring that story up because it affected, I mean, I got some goosebumps now just retelling someone else's story about their experience, not mine, but that's the power of story. And we can talk about that maybe on the 389th podcast or something. But the point being, and to answer your question, human being, this is a practice, right? Mindfulness is a practice. Mindfulness is not a religion. It derives from Buddhism, which, depending on the Buddhist you talk to, they would say, yes, that's a religion, or no, it's not. And which is why I think it's kind of cool. It's just a way to show up and to be in relationship with this human experience in a different way. And to understand that we are human beings. And so we're going to have all of these ups and downs and lefts and rights and twists and turns and strikes and gutters. Like, that's just part of the human experience. And the practice for me is about, how do we live with that in a way where we're a little more balanced? There's this heart quality of, the Pali word is upekkha, and it means equanimity. And this is our capacity to not get too high and not get too low with these swings of life. And another metaphor that Jack and Tara like to use is this idea of being the ocean, right? So when we're flying all over the place, in pre-2020 Kirk, I probably identified as the waves. And through this practice, and especially when we're thinking about this quality of equanimity, which I think is the anchoring of the 4 heart qualities, um, is this idea that we are actually as capable and have the capacity to be the ocean. And so that these
Mm.
waves of experience come through us, but we are this bigger, larger body of water able to hold all of what life brings to us. And so that's I'm still a neophyte as it comes to mindfulness as a practice. And equanimity is what, for me, is speaking the loudest as something to pay attention to. And so that's what I'm trying to do as best I can until it's time to move on into a different place to focus my attention. But for now, it's cultivating this capacity to be able to hold all of life and the ups and downs of it.
So if someone's listening to the podcast and starting to kind of nod the head and go, I want to try this. Where in the world does someone start? There's so many different meditations. There's so many books on mindfulness. There's apps. There's on and on and on. Where does so they might want to become more centered and become more aware of their thoughts, but there's this sudden overwhelm of where do I start?
Yeah. I completely get it. And as somebody who ratcheted up my practice by entering into a teacher certification program that took 2 years of intense practice and interactive coursework with other people on the path and from teachers, I had this major sense of overwhelm about the content, about the practice. So for me, I get it. And I think that personally, the best place to start for me was the apps that are available. And there's several. The one I use is called Insight Timer. It's the lineage of mindfulness that I practice is Vipassana. That's Pali for insight, so insight meditation. So you could look for my lane of meditation, you could look at Insight Meditation Society, it's IMS. You can look up those folks. You can look up teachers like Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach and Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg. Those would be like the four, like, I don't know, heavy hitters of people that I follow. Pema Chodron, who's prolific with her writing. In fact, I keep looking around her book. My wife is reading one of her books now. There are books and there's literature that are quite accessible. Anything written by Pema Chodron is quite accessible. What I mean by accessible is like it's a little bit easier to understand. And then there's some more cerebral stuff that if you're into that kind of stuff and you're a little bit of a masochist, you could start right away with Joseph Goldstein's book called Mindfulness, which is the size of a Bible and goes into great depth about, right, like the mechanics of the practice and the teachers, and like it's intense, but it's legit legit mindfulness. So I would personally start with apps, and I would just listen to 10, 15, 20-minute long talks while you're just listening.
Apps on your phone, right?
Yeah, like apps on your phone, exactly. And I could even show this little bell thing, Insight Timer, that's the bell. But I've got a whole mindfulness folder on my phone. There's Dharma Seed, there's Waking Up, there's Mind Spa, there's, I think, 10% Happier, just rebranded into Happier. That's one of the more popular ones. There's an app called Calm. There's an app called Headspace. I think those are really great. There's easy ways to kind of inundate our minds with content that's along the lines of what this practice is about. So you can listen to an audiobook, or you can listen to podcasts. Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield are the two main teachers of my program I went through, and they both have podcasts and they both write blogs and they both have many books they've written, and both of them write in ways that are quite accessible as well.
Speaking of overwhelmed, I can see the mind going, oh my gosh, what Jack Kornfield book do I start with? Or what exact app do I start with? I can see the mind wanting to plan it all exactly. Is that an exact right way to do this?
I don't think there's an exact way. I would just start where you are, which is actually the title of one of Pema Chodron's books. Start where you are. So maybe that's where I would start. And that's actually the first book I ever read. Um, it was given to me by a dear friend who, this is in 2018, so really kind of near the, right? So in 2018, I was starting to be a little vocal with my inner circle about, man, I feel like I'm not well and I need to, like, I was seeking a little bit here and there, like not with my immediate family, but telling, close colleagues and friends a little bit here and there. And my friend Michelle hipped me to Pema Chodron's work and said, why don't you read this book, Start Where You Are? And that's what I did. And I think that's when I really started to get focused on the path.
Thank you. I'm changing subjects slightly. Find the right note. You talk about both the inner condition. What do you mean by that?
Inner condition would be, especially when I'm not mindful of what, how I'm showing up, like we project outwardly a lot in life. We look to blame, we look for external reasons or excuses or like what is going on, when really my effectiveness in my life has everything to do with my own inner condition or my inner soil. So if you used to use a gardening metaphor, right? If I'm looking for outside techniques or strategies or fertilizers for my garden, it's only going to go so well putting stuff in from the top down. But if I really want growth and if I really want to blossom and bloom into my highest future potential, which in my opinion is, for me, as and my take on the human experience is that this life is here for us. It's a teacher and it's an opportunity for us to be who we were meant to be. And that can only come forward if we're tending to with our inner condition and the soil, right? So getting our hands down into the soil under the surface, right? We're trapped up here a lot of the time, right? We're stuck in our heads. And so to use this like line, right? Almost like the iceberg theory from any Psych 101 course you've ever taken, most of what's going on is below the surface. And so my practice is getting to the point where I can quiet my mind enough so that I can leave here and come down into here, right? And so there's so much wisdom that resides in our hearts, right? Heart. And there's a connection between the mind and the heart mind, right? We've disconnected through these things, through the constant busyness of life. We're just up here all the time. Again, this is where the train of thought comes into and leaves. This is where the trance of unworthiness exists. So through practice, we can drop below the surface and we can really tap into our guts. That trust your gut thing is a real thing, right? When we have these feelings, the other thing that mindfulness as a practice does is that it's an embodied practice. It gets us in tune with what's happening in our body. We don't listen to our bodies as much as we should. So through this practice, we're listening. And so when I have something that's misaligned, now I can work with it in a way that's skillful and wise and kind of like, okay, where is that showing up in my body and what most needs my attention? And then I can ask myself questions. And this is from Tara Brach. When we're working with things that are misaligned or we feel stuck, we can first allow it to be there, right? So part of working with our inner condition is allowing this sensation to continue, like this, like if we're just talking about anxiety, for example, like I deal with some anxiety and how that shows up in my body and just allow it rather than fighting it. So she also uses this phrase called attend and befriend. Most of the time we're trying to push things off, right? If I can think about alcohol, it's like alcohol was a way to make the anxiety, push the anxiety away. It makes me feel better, right? But what happens is that comes back in the form of hangxiety. And I feel it even worse the next day, rather than just being like, okay, I'm a human being and anxiety is something that happens in me. Again, I'm the vast ocean and this wave of anxiety is coming through me. I also know that it's going to go away, because much of the teaching of mindfulness is a practice, and from the Buddhist tradition is that things are impermanent in life. And in fact, some of the research is showing that, strong emotions that come through us actually only last for about 90 seconds. And so when you say that in a class, people go, well, I've been feeling anxious for 2 weeks straight. It's the thoughts that link to the anxiety, the actual physiological experience of the emotion. Our thoughts link onto it, and that's what makes it feel like it's lasting longer than it should. So if we're skilled enough through practice to quiet the mind and allow the experience to happen through us like a wave, right? And then the thought doesn't so much come up, anxiety, I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing well in my life, or whatever that trance of unworthiness is. When we're able to allow that to pass through us and quiet our mind, we have space to ask a new question. And this is from Tara. She says, who would I be if I chose not to believe the story I'm telling myself? That's the question, I think, for me, that resonates most deeply when you ask, what do you mean by interior conditioning? The way I tend to my inner soil and the way I pay attention to my inner condition is I get quiet enough to ask questions like, who would I be if I chose not to believe the story I've been telling myself? Who would that person be? And feeling and sensing into that insight, and then maybe setting some intentions from that place. And mindfulness could be summed up in 2 words, really: intention and attention. So when we get to the place where we can let the experiences come through, work with them in such a way where we ask wise questions, wholesome questions about who would I be if I let go of these things, these narratives, set some intentions from that authentic place, that authentic center, the next step is to ratchet up the attention. I think of Spinal Tap when the guy looks at the amp and says, this one goes to 11. Can we turn our attention up to 11? Because when we set an intention from our authentic core and we pay a high quality of attention, that's where the energy will flow. Where our attention goes, energy flows. And so I think the combination of those things can be quite fruitful, and really come with a sense of like centeredness and groundedness, and really live into this idea in this space that I can be the ocean.
We only have 7 minutes left, and it'll appear I'm going slightly off, a lot off topic, but I want to ask this and then tie it into what we're talking about. I hope we can tie it back into what we're talking about. But
We'll try.
But what is person-centered planning, and why is it so meaningful to you?
Person-centered planning is a practice that, if I'm thinking about my professional life, I'm one of the directors at a small organization in San Diego that helps people with developmental disabilities live authentic lives in the community. And person-centered planning is a practice that was developed by 2 of the most important people, not called a family member in my life, John O'Brien and Beth Mountain. We just lost John O'Brien a month ago. One of the wisest of the elders in our field has passed. So I feel like I need to say that, even to a world of podcast viewers who may not know who the hell John O'Brien is, just know that it's critically important. And John O'Brien and Beth Mountain are the godfather and godmother of person-centered planning in the field of.
I just as an aside, I'm sorry I didn't know that till yesterday that he had passed.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
I'm sorry.
I'm grateful for the time I had to study under him and to call him a mentor and a colleague and a friend. A person-centered planning is a process and a practice that is in direct conflict with the prevailing sentiment about what is possible for people with disabilities. People with disabilities are born into a life of marginalization. They're born into a life of devaluing just because that's the way society has seen them. And you and I can let each other off the hook about this. That othering existed before you and I were born in 1975 and 1977. Where we become complicit is when we become aware that the segregation and the dehumanizing of people with disabilities is present, and we choose to continue to replicate services in that manner that perpetuate that sentiment. So my organization, LifeWorks, tries our best to embody person-centered planning practices. And the languaging, I've already used it in this talk, and that's where the intersection comes from John and Beth, is always person-centered planning's intention is to get to someone's core so that we can help cultivate their capacity to realize and live into their highest future potential. And so that's what person-centered planning is about. We support like 40 people across San Diego County, and people who are looking for services from us call us and ask us, tell us about all your programs. And I say, well, we don't have a program. We meet people, we listen to them deeply, we drop the narrative that we've been told or we've read in reports, and we meet someone eye to eye, and we get below here again, and we drop down into here, and we listen with an open mind, which means we suspend the voice of cynicism. We listen with an open heart. Well, we listen with an open mind and we suspend the voice of judgment. We listen with an open heart, which suspends the voice of cynicism. And then we listen with an open will, which suspends the voice of fear. Those voices of judgment, cynicism, and fear are rampant in our minds. They're qualities that drive the trance of unworthiness. And so becoming aware of those voices and hitting them with the antidote, which is an open mind, an open heart, and open will, you can drop down from here into here to really start to listen to people and with empathy and in a generative way. So that's what person-centered planning means to me, is we're helping people realize their highest future potential. And we're doing that by listening to people differently and understanding that there is a lot more possible for all people when we listen that deeply to people. And the intersection, I think, in the teachings that I've been studying and that I now teach, are that mindfulness is about getting to our authentic core and expressing that in the world. And person-centered planning is about getting to someone's authentic core and helping them express that in the world. So one of the really groovy observations that I've come to is my own personal practice can absolutely be married to my professional practices, which is a wonderful place to be. And I feel so grateful that I'm in a place where I can just be me, whether I'm at home being a dad or a husband, or I'm at work being a director and a facilitator and a guide for this. All of it is about getting to our authentic core so that we can operate from there as a means to getting to our highest future potential.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. This is I greatly appreciate all the metaphors with which you used to explain, and the humility and the personal stories. Thanks so much. One last question, which I probably asked you before. When you want, as of today, what does doing your imperfect best mean to you?
It means honoring that I'm a human being and that I'm gonna be who I am, and I'm thankful to be at a place where I feel resourced enough to show up as I am, regardless of what other people might say or feel or think about me. I feel like being your imperfect best means showing up and interfacing with the world around you without judgment. And you're one of my teachers as well, Jason, in your writings and in this podcast, and the way you show up in the world is a reminder to me what it's like to be a human, on a path of being yourself and being so without judging oneself. So I thank you for that. And yeah, that's how I can answer it. It's this quality of non-judgment. I think that's most important.
Thank you so much, Kirk. I've learned so much from you during the show, and I trust that everyone listening will too. And it's wonderful being your friend. Thank you.
That feeling's mutual. Thanks, Jason, so much. I appreciate it.
Please stay on as I end this recording. It just takes a few minutes for things to upload. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another awkwardly awesome podcast. I urge you to think about what you've heard and talk about it and all that, and leave comments if you want. And most of all, thanks for being you. You are the best and only one of you in the world, on the earth, whatever that just means. So thanks for shining your light. Until next week, bye.